For 150 years, scientists have warned that the increasing amount of carbon in the atmosphere is creating a greenhouse effect, increasing temperatures all around the Earth. Yet, what's happening is the opposite. These extreme cold events seem contradictory to the logic, especially since the proof of what's causing it is right before your eyes. Weather technology that we're told is only being researched for the future is being implemented right now.
We're here in Santa Barbara County, home to one of the longest-running cloud seeding operations in the country. Today, it's mostly used to increase rain and snowfall, reduce the size of hail, and reduce fog at airports.
Traditionally, cloud seeding has been done from the air. So airplanes have had racks on them where these same flares are positioned on the airplane, and the airplane flies into the storm. So in order to reduce the cost to the client and reduce our carbon footprint, we've been able to station these on the ground. Now we can do this in places where weather permits. The primary seeding agent in this is silver iodide. Silver iodide is a simple compound. It's polar in nature like water. So there's chemical properties that help attract water molecules to silver iodide. It's also structured molecularly similar to ice. So it helps generate or helps spawn the generation of ice buildup, and then that becomes a hailstone or a snowflake that falls here primarily as rain. So one flare like this has billions and billions of potential sites for that water to congregate around. We'll launch them in sequences. We watch the radar to see when bands of the highest concentration of liquid water are passing above us in the clouds, and we try to target those high concentration pockets in the storm systems. We'll launch between 3 and 20 flares for a typical storm. Once the flare is lit, it takes a little bit of time to carry up into the clouds, and once it's up at the proper elevation, it'll take about 20 minutes to instigate the rain or the snow process. So overall, you're probably looking at about 40 to 45 minutes before you're seeing the maximum result.
Craig Funky is flying me to the edge of a violent thunderstorm.
You see how nice and crisp the top of that cloud is up there?
Yeah. But the former commercial pilot isn't some adrenaline junkie courting danger. He's a cloud seeder, chasing this menacing storm to squeeze out extra rain for the drought-stricken farmland below.
As a pilot going through school, you're taught to avoid thunderstorms.
This is Craig's job, firing chemicals into the clouds in a controversial attempt to modify the weather. He's literally a rainmaker.
We're told it's intended to protect us from scorching temperatures and disappearing coastlines. But methods being used are also harming our air, soil, oceans. They are harming all life and causing these freakish storms that are occurring at an ever-increasing rate. And unfortunately, as long as we remain oblivious to it, or deny it, or belittle those who are trying to alert us, the sustainability of life on this planet will remain at the mercy of a very powerful few who are going to dramatic ends to keep the status quo and to convince you that your perception is wrong.
Just last year, the Defense Department reported that climate change is a direct threat to more than 2/3 of the military's operationally critical installations. That's what the military warned him. And this could well could be a conservative estimate. Donald Trump's climate denial may not have caused these fires and record floods and record hurricanes, but if he gets a second term, these hellish events will continue to become more common, more devastating, and more deadly.
If you thought weather control was just science fiction, it's okay, you're not alone. There are reasons it's scarcely mentioned in the media. In case you missed it, here are some recent reports about it that came from China. The lack of discussion about weather modification in the West and Wikipedia's skimpy definition on climate engineering may lead you to think it's all very new technology.
Expansionist China is now looking at the skies. It has revealed plans to drastically expand on experimental weather modification program covering an area of more than 1.5 times the total size of India. China has long sought to control the weather by seeding clouds. The process works by injecting small amounts of chemicals like silver iodide into clouds, causing them to precipitate. The technology has been used to create artificial rain and snow, but the massive push ostensibly for domestic use is sending alarm bells ringing in India, especially in the context of the recent conflicts across the line of actual control. There are fears that weather modification could potentially give China an edge, hampering troop movements in the mountainous regions.
It's time to get that daily news. I ain't watching TV, I'm a log on the YouTube. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe. Talking about that raw, uncut news. You a fool. You believe in mainstream and local news. Like, share, and subscribe. Like, share, and subscribe.
That began in June has triggered severe flooding and landslides across the south and central parts of China. More than 140 people are dead or missing. Nearly 40 million people are affected, raising fears of the spread of the coronavirus. The deluge has also caused disruption to vital supply chains like personal protective equipment, which is needed for the fight against COVID-19. The giant Three Gorges Dam, used to hold back water to ease downstream flood risks, has now exceeded its warning level by more than 10 meters. 33 rivers across the country have also hit record high levels. More than 100,000 personnel, including soldiers, have been deployed to help with search and relief efforts.
Dramatic video shared on social media on Tuesday showed commuters chest-deep in murky floodwaters on a lightless subway train in Zhengzhou, the capital of China's Henan province. The daily lives of the city's residents have been upended since the weekend in an unusually active rainy season. A commuter who survived the ordeal wrote on social media that the water outside the cabin was rising and it was leaking in from the door. She said she was really afraid as the water reached her chest, but the most terrifying thing was not the water, it was the increasingly diminishing air supply in the cabin. Another video showed water gushing through an empty underground platform. The city's authorities said more than 500 commuters were rescued.
But what's really worrying the authorities at the moment is the damage that's been done to a dam, they say, that could be close to collapse. And that dam is near a city of 7 million people. Now, the People's Liberation Army has been deployed to see what they can do to try to save the dam. The PLA actually have very effective engineers, some of the best engineers in the country, and they will now be working around the clock to prevent what could be a real disaster. The number of people who've been evacuated has now risen actually from 10,000 to 100,000. Now, we traditionally get, bad weather like this every July and August in China, but in the past 24 hours, Henan province has received the amount of rain that it normally gets over a year. So a year's rainfall has fallen in the past 24 hours.
Actually, the first rain-making patent was filed over 100 years ago, in 1891. And artificial cloud cover patents were filed almost 100 years ago in 1927, along with cloud seeding in 1947, which is the process that climatologists use to create rain. By 1952, headlines like this exonerated our technological success with weather manipulation. Then, in 1962, after President Lyndon Johnson asserted, "He who controls the weather controls the world," the subject seemed to disappear. Naturally, many people were not aware of the use of weather as a weapon of war. So programs like Project Popeye in the 60s went unnoticed. Popeye viciously cloud-seeded Vietnam to worsen their monsoon storms. And Project Nile Blue attempted to affect the sugar industry in Cuba, discussing weather warfare. Some of the ideas that were considered included creating tidal waves that would destroy a shoreline, or putting pathogens in a cloud. Dane Wigington is a fierce fighter for weather modification transparency. And he says that weather modification is the crown jewel by which countries are destabilized or forced to allow occupation. He adds that a nation can be brought to its knees without even knowing they were at war.
In Germany, entire communities are left picking through muddy rubble after what some are calling one of the worst disasters to hit the country since World War II. The death toll soaring to around 200 in Germany and Belgium. Nearly 300 are still missing. This level of destruction is difficult for survivors to comprehend.
There's so many people dead. You don't expect people to die in a flood in Germany. You expect it maybe in poor countries, but you don't expect it here. But it was all too fast, too quick.
These satellite images taken Sunday show the scope of devastation in Germany. here on the ground, that devastation is felt firsthand. People desperate to salvage what's left of their homes and their businesses. This woman had a clothing business in Euskirchen. Her livelihood now gone.
How high was the water up to here?
That's here. Oh, wow. Her neighbors are helping her save what they can. It's just them cleaning up for now. Outside help hasn't been able to reach them yet. In parts of Western Germany, the infrastructure has been completely upended.
Those floodwaters are so powerful, it just ripped through the pavement, cutting off towns. These are the kind of conditions that recovery crews are up against.
Germany, Belgium, and parts of France were battered by heavy rains late last week. But it was Germany that took the heaviest toll. The flash floods sweeping in at alarming speed. The result, the rains turning roads into debris-filled rivers, sweeping away cars, trapping people in their homes. We saw this highway turn into a riverbank. Semi-trucks and cars tossed around like toys.
You can see just how powerful these floodwaters are. The highway behind me is still completely underwater. Those floods came ripping through here. They flipped cars. They flipped these trucks into each other. Now, Army personnel and tanks are here on a search and recovery mission, trying to drag these trucks out.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel paying a visit to the hard-hit city of Schuld this weekend, calling the damage shocking and surreal. And in the nearby medieval town of Achweiler, more than 110 people dying in that region alone. This man telling us how he barely escaped with his elderly mother alive. Many of the homes from the 1500s or older are now caked with thick mud. Many fear they all may have to be destroyed. As Germany remains in shock, scientists are predicting more frequent extreme events. In Germany, local meteorologists say that what they've experienced is the worst flooding in at least 500 years. Perhaps no clearer sign that no one is immune from climate change.
A developing story in China. Massive floods hitting Zhengzhou. That's a hub for factories that produce Apple iPhones. Authorities there said that it rained more in an hour yesterday than it does in an average month. Overnight, Apple supplier Foxconn said that its factory hasn't been affected by the flooding in the city. The company told CNBC it activated an emergency response plan for flood control measures and would continue to monitor the situation.
Weather warfare can be deployed in secret, and it will always appear to be caused by Mother Nature. Weather warfare is deceptive and insidious.
Storms causing a lot of damage and leading to problems across the area. Just look at what the tri-state was dealing with. Rotating clouds in Woodbridge near New Jersey earlier today. This storm triggered a tornado warning there, but so far no reports that it touched down. The flash flooding made it difficult to get around many parts of New Jersey. Cars bobbing in the water stalled out as drivers tried to maneuver out of that water. Water quickly rose in Roselle Park, New Jersey, surging down the street and into a store, and you can see the water was almost as high as the tires of the cars there. Heavy rain overwhelmed roads near Newark Airport. Authorities had to rescue people from their cars there. Tonight, frustration at the airport. More than 200 flights canceled or delayed at Newark. Passengers facing long lines to claim bags and rebook their flights.
Roadways turned into rivers with cars floating like debris. This was no hurricane, but a fast-moving storm that left parts of Newark underwater.
I'm turning around. This is ridiculous.
Flash flooding taking drivers by surprise. Even an NJ Transit bus seen driving through floodwaters in the Ironbound section of the city.
I had to get out of the car through the window, and push the car out.
While the family inside this BMW on their way to rescue a cat from a nearby shelter when they ended up needing to be rescued themselves.
It was rain, and then suddenly the water started rising.
Over in Roselle Park, brown water along Chestnut Street rushed into nearby businesses like Costa's Restaurant and Pizzeria that ended up with several inches on their floor, while scary spinning clouds were seen hovering over Woodbridge. Back in Newark, floodwaters eventually receded, but not in time for this Uber Eats driver on his way to deliver ice cream.
And I've been driving around for 30-40 minutes trying to deliver my Uber Eats order, and I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. I've been around 4 times. I want to go through this water, but
it comes and goes so fast that it can change in an instant.
This video recorded in Cedar City shows just how fast that rain came down.
This is flooding in the Ashdown Forest neighborhood of Cedar City.
This video shows the power of all that rain. Jesse Harris recorded this as he drove home. He estimates it had only been raining for about 10 minutes.
Got about 2 houses from my home, and bam, whole road is a river.
Several roads on the east side of Cedar City experienced flooding. This was taken on Fiddler's Canyon Road. You can see some cars driving through the water. Jesse didn't.
I went up on the sidewalk because there was no running water there. I see way too many people foolishly try and ford running water.
He was able to get home safely and shot this from his window.
It started raining again, and it looks like we are just going to get continually flooded out here.
Cedar City Police and the Iron County Sheriff's Office say they didn't receive any reports of serious damage or injuries caused by flooding from this storm, but the afternoon's events alarming for residents.
I've been in this house about 7 years, and I have never seen flooding like this before.
An alarming reminder that severe storms and the flooding they cause should always be taken seriously.
People see, 28 reported tornadoes in Iowa. It's Iowa. They get tornadoes, right? Not like that, and not in July. That is 4 times their entire monthly average of July. Twister after twister, zeroing in on Iowa.
Tornado is on the ground, due east.
At least 28 tornadoes tearing across fields, igniting power lines.
Ooh. Oh, look at that.
This was the scene in Lake City. Debris flying through the air, turning it into projectiles across the road. This home shredded, the roof peeled right off. A drone capturing the severity of all the damage. Tree limbs snapping, or in this case, catching this trailer. And a semi-truck bowled over. Inside, dozens of pigs. Thankfully, they were able to corral all of them quickly. And in Arizona, the long-awaited monsoon rains, coming down too fast and furious, sending cars floating down streets. Much of the Southwest suffering severe drought, now getting 4 to 5 inches of rain so quickly and under a flash flood watch. First responders in rescue mode plucking people from peril. This man and his daughter being helped stranded on the roof of the car in Tucson. And now, at least 68 large wildfires are burning an area the size of Delaware. In Oregon, the bootleg fire is now being called a mega fire. It's grown to an area nearly 7 times the size of San Francisco. It's mostly in forested areas, so the officials say it will likely burn until late fall.
Threat going forward today. The jet stream is really the culprit. Dry and windy in the northwest. Then you've got the monsoon storms from Tucson Metro right through, say, the southeastern Arizona into New Mexico, right? Southwestern New Mexico. And then severe storms possible anywhere from Oklahoma up to Michigan and New York. Damaging winds, the main threat. But we've already seen this storm produce considerable amounts of tornadoes. I'd watch out right in the center of the region.
Tonight in Larimer County, where heavy rain over that Cameron Peak burn scar sent debris down the flood-swollen Poudre River. There have been evacuations. Right now, video from a CBS 4 viewer shows murky, nearly black water rushing down the Poudre Canyon earlier this evening. Once those storms fired up, debris from that burn scar got flushed out. This video, a clear indication of potential damage along the Poudre. A ring camera on a riverside property caught that massive debris float. And you can see in these still photos, the river just clogged with all sorts of things, possibly a car there, if you look closely. Right now, we're hearing of dive teams being called to the area and bridges being washed out.
And rescue crews going door to door to help anyone who may still be in the canyon. All right, tonight, nearly 40 million Americans across the South face the threat of severe storms. The region has been getting hammered for days by tornadoes, hail, damaging gusts, and flash floods. CBS.
Looks like a tornado.
Strong storms pounded the South for a second day in a row, bringing severe weather to parts of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama, and hammering Texas with heavy rain, hail, and several tornadoes.
Holy cow.
Like this one southwest of Fort Worth. In Waxahachie, witnesses say another tornado cut across a busy interstate, sideswiping several big rigs, forcing drivers to scramble to help people pinned by the wreckage.
After the storm blew over the highway, it came this way and came across a residential area. You can see it flipped this mobile home over. Around 3 dozen homes and businesses were damaged by the storm.
Ellis County Judge Todd Little.
Many barns, many things that were just, fortunately, no human life was taken, and we feel blessed for that right now.
8 people were treated at the hospital for injuries.
The National Weather Service says the tornado that came through here was an EF2 with winds up to 120 miles an hour. And this is the kind of damage an EF2 can do. You can see the side of this house was ripped off. But let me show you what 120 mile per hour winds can do. This is a 2x4 that impaled this trailer.
35 million people from Atlanta to Baltimore are at risk of damaging winds, hail, potential tornadoes as well today. The biggest risk in central Virginia. And we're getting word from Nashville police that last night's torrential rains killed at least 4 people. Right now, dozens of roads are blocked by floodwaters. Crews have rescued more than 100 people.
Absolutely right. The recovery here is going to take months, and this new storm system moving through here only adds insult to injury. But I do want to get to that emergency playing out in Nashville as we speak here. The footage coming from that city is heartbreaking. We are talking about 6 inches of rain in the city, up to a foot in surrounding areas that's fallen in the last 24 hours, and that's resulted in the scenes you're seeing out play out. We have roadways turning into waterways, rescues that took place all night long with people being trapped in either in their cars or in buildings that were being flooded and at risk of collapse. And it's not just the rain that's the issue here as this massive storm system makes its way through the south and then up the north to the eastern seaboard. We know that it's also posing problems with hail and heavy rain, or heavy wind rather. We know that the Bristol Motor Speedway had to actually postpone a race there due to the fact they received so much water in and around that facility, it was unraceable. Also, in eastern Tennessee, hail proved to be such an issue there, it covered the entire grounds of Eastern Tennessee University's football stadium there. So if it is not one thing, it is another with these massive storm cells that are working their way through this part of the country as we speak. Meanwhile, here in Noonan, a lot of the folks I had a chance to speak with yesterday tell me they were hoping to use yesterday and today to really start some momentum when it came to cleaning up. We still have people here without power right now, and the fact that we have more rain coming down in this part of the state only means they're going to have to delay the inevitable and pick up the pieces from that EF4 tornado that roared through this community just a few days ago.
More wild weather in Arizona as monsoon rain caused flash flooding in Arizona's high country. This video shows a father and his 2 daughters being rescued after their vehicle was swept away in fast-moving water. Nobody was hurt in this incident. Everybody went home safely. But it could have been very different. Floodwaters hit Flagstaff for a second consecutive day, leaving roads impassable, some residential streets looking like rivers.
It's a view of a flash flood that's rarely seen.
Let's get out of the way.
Just outside the town of Mayer, Arizona, north of Phoenix, came a wall of water, mud, and debris. Campers scrambled as the flood wiped out their gear.
Thank God they got out of there.
In the flatlands below, the flooding came as a surprise to people who were enjoying a bright sunny day. It came a day after this flash flood that struck Southern California with a vengeance.
Right now, very serious situation out here in the Acton area.
Mud wiped out part of a railroad track in Acton, California. This woman was among the nearly 200 passengers evacuated in the high desert.
We stuck in the middle of nowhere. I seen the flood on both sides. I said, there's something's going on, something's wrong.
It's been an active week of weather throughout the Southwest with rain, floods, and powerful winds uprooting trees.
The monsoon storms meeting burn scars for a dangerous combination. This video here a reminder of just how powerful flash flooding can be. You see that rushing water literally carrying a Prius down the street. Now this happened in Flagstaff. The video taken by Taylor Landy. Gila County residents also dealing with flash flooding near the Telegraph Fire burn scar. This morning's rain causing ash, soot, and debris to flow in the nearby washes. Gila County officials say the washes tend to be smaller, meaning just a little rain can cause some big problems.
Overnight in the Northeast, another round of torrential rain and flash flooding.
Scared, I'm shaking.
In hard-hit Bucks County, Pennsylvania, some residents forced to immediately evacuate their homes as water poured in.
Everything around my bed and everything was just full of water and puddles, and she was like, we have to get out.
Rescue boats helping people to safety.
I grew up here, man. I've never seen this.
Scenes like this playing out across the region. In Boston, which is already dealing with one of its wettest Julys ever. Rescue workers helping stranded drivers in this community just north of the city.
The water's up to the top of the seats.
Cars also trapped in floodwaters in West Milford, New Jersey. Meanwhile, out west, the problem is scorching heat.
That moment when you open the oven and that gust of heat hits you in the face. That is exactly what it feels like.
As blistering summer conditions continue to pack a punch.
It's too hot. It's too hot.
Much needed relief for some may be on the horizon.
Luckily, it's not going to be as hot today as what we had to deal with over the weekend.
The heat dome that's been baking the region for weeks is finally starting to shrink. But for millions of residents and visitors, more dry air and triple-digit forecasts are on the way.
Just try to stay inside and hydrate.
After tying the city's record high of 117 degrees, temperatures are set to top 100 all week in Las Vegas. In California and Oregon, scorching conditions and ongoing droughts are fueling massive wildfires. The Beckworth Complex fire in California spreading by tens of thousands of acres, with blazes impacting air quality hundreds of miles away. Meteorologists say this blanket of smoke hovering over Utah could linger for days as more wild summer weather sets in across the country.
Most compelling video of the day, strap hangers wading through waist-deep water in a New York City subway station. This is just one of several similar scenes around the city.
With the water rising and nowhere for it to go, this was the station at 157th and Broadway. Inundated, people in waist-high water using trash bags, anything they could to get through it. This woman almost fell in. Listen to that, Nagel Avenue in Washington Heights. This is a storefront. In Upper Manhattan, it was hard to walk. The rushing water, too much for this chair. At 42nd Street,
But given the amount of piece of track that's been flooded, it feels like it was the pounding of the rain.
The MTA trying to explain after anger and plenty of social media vitriol, including Eric Adams, fresh off a victory in the Democratic mayoral primary. This is what happens when the MTA makes bad spending decisions for decades. We need congestion pricing ASAP to protect stations from street flooding, elevate entrances, and add green infrastructure to absorb flash storm runoff. This cannot be New York. New York City was a mess everywhere. Look at the Major Deegan. Cars immersed, traffic at a standstill. Harlem River Drive, both directions. Central Park, driving on sidewalks to avoid the water. This man tried to go through it. Too much for his car. Smoking. Then it stopped. And this is all before the remnants of Elsa moved through tonight. Back at 157th Street, Rob King had a tough commute, but he doesn't blame the MTA.
Well, what are you going to do? It's big rain. Yeah, I don't know if that's anyone's fault.
Look at it.
It's right there. Crossing the road.
Weather modification includes geoengineering, which is, by definition, the deliberate large-scale manipulation of environmental processes that affect the Earth's climate in an attempt to counteract the effects of global warming. It was decided by a few that the best way to prevent warming was not to change power sources, but to prevent solar radiation from hitting the Earth, a technique called solar radiation management, and a process which mimics the effect of a volcanic eruption. There are a variety of methods that can be used to prevent sun from reaching and heating the Earth.
Meanwhile, Bill Gates is backing the first high-altitude experiment of one radical climate change solution, creating a massive chemical cloud that could cool the Earth. It's called solar geoengineering, and it's highly controversial. It would look something like this. Thousands of planes would fly very high and use nozzles to inject millions of tons of light-reflecting particles into the stratosphere. It would create a thin chemical cloud of those particles around the whole planet, blocking some sunlight from reaching the surface. It would mimic a giant volcanic eruption, which we know cools the Earth. Back in 1991, Mount Pinatubo erupted in the Philippines. It was the largest eruption to affect a densely populated area, creating avalanches and giant mud flows that left more than 700 dead and 30,000 homeless. It also spewed a cloud of 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide particles into the stratosphere. That chemical cloud was hundreds of miles across and reflected about 2% of sunlight back to space. And in 1992, the Earth was cooler than in 1991. One reason this technology is appealing, it's cheap. One study estimates it would cost an average of $2.25 billion globally every year for the first 15 years of deployment. Compare that to the $500 billion the U.S. government estimates it will cost just the U.S. by 2100 if no action is taken against climate change. Or the $1.6 to $3.8 trillion projected global spending by 2050 on low-carbon energy production. You can also compare it to direct air carbon capturing, another climate change solution backed by Bill Gates and by big oil. It involves sucking billions of tons of carbon out of the air. And at $100 to $200 a ton, it could be big business. Solar geoengineering, on the other hand, is so cheap that nobody currently stands to make money from the process.
But just because a solution is cheap doesn't make it a good one. It's cheap and dangerous.
Bill Gates is among a dozen individual donors and 14 foundations backing the first stratospheric solar geoengineering experiment out of Harvard. It's called Stratospheric Controlled Perturbation Experiment, or SCOPEX. A high-altitude balloon will lift instruments about 20 kilometers into the stratosphere, where it will release less than 2 kilograms of different naturally occurring chemicals, like calcium carbonate and sulfates, and then measure the change in atmospheric chemistry and light scattering. The Harvard group that runs SCOPEX and other experiments has raised more than $16 million, more than double any other solar geoengineering effort. And annual global funding has gone up from $1 million in 2008 to $8 million in 2018, with the majority of that funding coming from the U.S. The first phase of SCOPEX will cost around $3 million, with much more needed for wider research on solar geoengineering. To this point, stratosphere injections have only been tested with climate modeling. In the UK, a government-funded solar radiation management test called SPICE was cancelled in 2012 because of issues with patents.
That was 80 years ago. So if we believe the common narrative about this technology only being researched for potential use in the future, this means that since the first studies in it began, we've sent spacecraft beyond Pluto, we've cloned life forms, developed artificial intelligence, created supersonic jets, the internet, cell phones, and more, but apparently have had no advancement in our understanding of the effects of cloud seeding and SAI. Is that possible?